All right, guys. Welcome to the webinar. Today, we're going to have another dive into the XG Firewall MSP edition. What we're going to be looking at today is going to be CFM and SFM. This is going to be more of a walkthrough on how to use CFM and SFM in your day-to-day business. Some of the key features in there, such as templates. We get questions around those all the time, so that's kind of what prompted this webinar. I also want to go into a little bit of a new release for us. This was actually just released last weekend. It's called CM1. It's our central management for the XG Firewall. It's located inside of Central Admin itself. We're going to go through, we're actually going to onboard a couple firewalls into there, walk you through that as well. So we're going to go over the agenda today. So the agenda is going to be, again, we're going to start with CFM and SFM overview. We're going to get into the dashboard, the XG management, and again, the templates that are inside of there as well. Again, CM1 was just released. That stands for Central Management version 1. This is now available. There are some components you'll have to have on there. So you'll need your XG Firewall up to at least 17.5.1. I would recommend 17.5.3. which is our latest MR release. It is in soft release right now. You can get that through my Sophos. So quickly, before we actually jump into CFM and SFM, you've all seen my other webinars on there, hopefully, talking about the differences of CFM and SFM. We're actually going to be going into an SFM firewall appliance, taking a look at that. That's the on-premise virtual firewall manager. Again, this is going to be much faster. It's simplified onboarding, better performance, and access to the diagnostic logs. CFM is great for those that cannot host a firewall themselves. They don't have the ability, they don't have the hardware on site to actually host the firewall manager. It is all hosted by Sophos. There is a bit of a multi-staged onboarding process that does take a little bit to get through. Diagnostic logs are only available through support, but there is nothing for you as a partner to do, and there is no cost associated with it. So again, both have their pros and cons in this mix. Looking at CM1, kind of some of the pros here. Easy setup. So hopefully most of you are already taking advantage of synchronized security. CM1, which you're going to see when we go through this, is utilizing synchronized security to bring the firewall into the actual central management. This is hosted in Central Admin. So right where you see your endpoints, your servers, all your other products for Sophos Central, you'll see a new tab called Firewall Management, and that's where we're going to go in. We're going to see all of your actual XG firewalls that have been onboarded. Another great feature being brought in with CM1 is you no longer need to have the WAN HTTPS open on your firewall. There is no need for the web admin to be open on the WAN so people can access it. We actually do this with a call using a support tunnel. This is the same support tunnel that Sophos would have you open if you were requesting support through our Sophos support on there. They come in the back end, doesn't require anything. It's a firewall reaching out to us saying, yes, the tunnel needs to be open, and then bringing us back into the firewall. This does bring in some centralized alerting, so it brings your alerting for the XG Firewall into Central Admin as well, which means you can get those alerts via email into your RMM tools, your PSA tools, ticketing tools, whatever you need. And for those partners that are out there that, either you've got MSP accounts or even a termed account where you want to give your partners access, and maybe you're wanting to give them access to their endpoints and their firewalls. With CFM, there was no good way to do that. With this, it's on the customer's central admin portal. You can give them access to their portal. The same role-based administration applies. So if you don't want them to be able to change anything, you can set that up for the role-based administration of read-only as well. So some of the cons right out the gate, and these are more just the fact that we are in version 1 of the central management, is there are no templates. So what we're going to be talking today with SFM, CFM are going to be templates. This is going to be changing a little bit. We're going to call this grouping. This won't be until our CM2 timeframe. There's also right now no backup management and no firmware management. Those will be coming hopefully by the end of this quarter. We're looking at CM1.1. There's a few holdups to get it into the first version, but we will have our backups, our firmware management, and hopefully our near zero touch configuration available there as well. As I did mention, this is all based around 17.5. If you are still running 17.1, you will not be able to bring a firewall into the central manager through central admin. 17.5.1 is the first place where you're actually going to see the alerts, and 17.3 actually 17.5.3 brings the additional alerting capabilities into there as well. So just a quick overview on a roadmap, kind of to see where we're at right now. We are at that CM1 point on the map here. So we look at the third line down. What we're going to have is we're at where we have single firewall management, which you can again have multiple, but it's managing the single firewall at a time, some basic monitoring and alerts. 1.1, and these are basically in concept right now. So these may slip back or forward depending on the planning and actually the development work that gets done on there. So we are looking by the end of Q2 2019 to have 1.1, again, configuration for backups, firmware updates, and a zero-touch deployment. What I mean by zero touch is we're going to give you the ability to go in and create a brand new firewall in Central Admin, drop that configuration to a USB drive, and simply send that USB drive with the firewall to where it needs to go, or if you're doing it on your bench, plug it into the back of the firewall, boot it up. It'll bring the entire configuration and everything and have that firewall prepped, ready to go. Our CM2 and CM2.1 are going to be a little ways out. They are going to be next calendar year, so 2020 is where we're looking to have the group management, where we're going to be able to take a group of firewalls inside of Central Admin and apply rules to all those firewalls inside of that group. That is a little bit of an undertaking. We are building this management tool from the ground up. If you need those types of features, then staying on SFM or CFM for right now with the templates is going to be the best option. All right, so we're not going to do Q&A just yet. Let's actually get in. We're going to take an actual look through here. So we're going to come into the XG Firewall Manager. So I'm logging into SFM. This is going to be my Sophos Firewall Manager. Again, exact same thing as the CFM. This is only hosted on premise. So as you can see here, it looks just like as if you're logging into an XG Firewall with the on-prem. I'm going to put my username and password into the Firewall Manager, and I'm going to be presented with my dashboard. Now we're going to do a quick overview on the dashboard here, run through, make sure you guys understand what all these components on here mean, how to take action on those from here as well. So at the top, again, it's just going to show you the version you're at right now. If you did notice on the roadmap, we do have 17.1 coming out for SFM. There was nothing much after that, so we are kind of putting CFM and SFM on the back burner. We are not going to do a lot of development in CFM and SFM, as CM is kind of what we're doing and pushing for moving forward. Below that, you're going to see all the devices that are currently managed by the Central Firewall Manager or the SFM. You can click on any one of these and it'll prompt you with all the devices that are inside here. So you can see that I've got my 2 webinar firewalls that we're going to be taking a look at today. These are online and synchronized. I've also got my NUC Lab firewall here, which is currently offline. These are all virtual firewalls. Again, it will indicate the model here as well as the company that is currently assigned to those as well. This company name here is brought in by the registration information in my Sophos. So same thing here. If we want to see the disconnected firewalls, you can quickly and easily run through this to find out what's going on in the environment, who's attached, what's happening in the environment, which firewalls are currently synchronized or which ones haven't been synchronized yet or unsynchronized. You can also click here to get into a list view. This list view is going to bring us to a section we're going to come back to in a few minutes, but you're going to see this is all the devices. We can come in here, we can select a device and have it rebooted. We can delete that device out of there. We can go in and edit that device. We need to edit a name or any of the information for connectivity to that device. That is all done through here. Taking a look at the device monitor summary. You have the ability to adjust these thresholds. So you can do this with a quick and easy click right here on the adjust threshold. This will bring you again into the system and monitor and device monitor options here. You have the ability to monitor or change these 2 different ways. You can do this by model. You can see here it has my virtual firewall, or by individual device if I want to get specific on certain devices. You can see what the current status is for each of those. So my security, my resource, my licensing, and the availability options on here. If you wanted to edit any of these, it will bring you into where you can just edit these all in one card view. Edit the thresholds that you're comfortable with. Obviously, licensing is definitely a big one. You may want to know earlier. Maybe you want to be 90 days out to get a warning on some of your licenses are expiring, and maybe 30 days for critical if you have those termed licensing. If you're on the MSP Flex, this won't really concern you too much. So taking a look at the home here, we can also come in and take a look at these so we can see what's going on in my current environment. And at this point, I do want to point out there is one glitch that unfortunately will not be fixed in SFM or CFM, and it is going to be under the availability. So if we click into these, let's see what's going on. I've got a license that is currently in a red state. I've got some resources that are currently in a yellow state. So let's click in and find out what's going on with these firewalls. You have a couple different options. You can put this as the flat view. It's going to list all your different firewalls out down here, or you can put this in card view. It's going to show each individual firewall with the different options on there. The flat view, as you can see, is going to give you a little more options as to what exactly inside of each of those firewalls is currently the problem. With the resources on my XG1, you can currently see that we are at 84% of memory utilization on that XG1. This one I left that way on purpose. It's only got 2 gigs of memory in there. It's a pretty low-end firewall, so it's going to be maxed out and running in a yellow state for the most of its life. My other one here, I've actually got about 4 gigs of memory in here, so you can see it's running at a nice 47%. Everything's good green, and performance-wise, we are all set. CPU, we're good. We're less than 1% utilization on here. And again, you also have your disk reporting on there as well. Coming over to the licensing. So again, this is going to be, again, more termed, but this all applies here. So I want to make sure we cover everything under the CFM, SFM. You can see here my XG1 is currently in a good state. Now, make sure you're watching this. So each one of these cards, and you'll notice XG1 is on top, Webinar 2 is on the bottom. This does occasionally flip when there's errors. It will put the errors towards the top. So the Webinar 2 is actually on the top here. So just make sure you guys are paying attention card by card. But we can see here that my base license still has plenty of time, but I have 9 days remaining on my network protection, my web protection. So as a partner, if this is a term license, I want to make sure that I reach out to this customer and want to get them renewed, or even better, move them over to Flex. That way, they're on a monthly recurring revenue with the billing, and I don't have to worry about the licensing any longer. So I did mention there was one little flaw inside of here, and this is going to be under the availability. So the availability sections that do work are going to be connected to central, your gateway status on here, and your red status. If there's no red tunnels configured, it'll just show up as gray. Unfortunately, with the interface status, there's a bug that they just could not get out. It's something that we inherited from the Cyberone days, that if an interface is down, even if it's unconfigured in the environment, it will report itself as down, and you're going to get a red bar in there. If we were actually to come into this firewall, which we'll do here in a few, you'll actually see that everything is good on this firewall except for that one interface, and the reason it's down is because I don't have it configured. So hopefully that makes sense there. Okay, guys, so what we're going to do is we're going to jump into System and Monitor. From System and Monitor, we're going to take a look at Managed Devices here. So what I want to do is a little bit of a review of the Managed Devices. We're not going to spend a lot of time here. You guys have seen this, hopefully, but I want to show you again where you actually have this if you're having connectivity issues. So one of the things that comes up quite often, somebody will call me up and they've got SFM or CFM, and this has got a red light on it, and they just can't figure out why it's got a red light on it. So it's going to be a couple of different things in here. The first and probably the most prevalent on there is going to be making sure that the username, password, and the IP/DNS name that you set up on here is correct. Make sure you fill this in and then hit test connection on here to verify whether or not the SFM or CFM can connect to that device. Also make sure that you have HTTPS on your WAN open. From CFM, you need to have WAN open from everywhere. So make sure you have under your device administration, you have WAN open for all. We can't give you specific IP addresses. CFM uses quite a few different ones that are rotating. If you're using SFM, you can get very specific because it's coming from your IP address, so you can lock it down to remote access from yours only. The device discovery tab here, this is where new firewalls will populate inside of here. You'll also see here under the discover a little red mark on there. And then the device grouping on here, again, just a little recap on here. This is where we can go in to create those device groups that we can use under users. We can also use these when deploying out rules for firewalls as well. So I created one inside of here for the webinar firewalls, and we're actually going to take advantage of this one. So this one is basically just my webinar firewalls. I'm doing this by device name, and we're saying starts with webinar. I want to make sure I grab all those firewalls that say webinar inside of here. So this quickly and easily allows me to go ahead and, again, push a template. These are all in the same company, they're all in the webinar company. And if I want to assign it to all those firewalls at one time, I can do that through the groups. For the all firewalls, remember we were doing that with a country. Select all the countries that you have inside of there, and then you can assign those to the users to give them access to those firewalls and give them either access to all firewalls or groups of firewalls. Last section in here, something that we normally don't take a look at on my normal calls, is going to be the template list. So these are the current templates that I have running in here. These are the ones we're going to be taking a look at, mainly my corp web and app template inside of here. You can deploy these templates out. You can delete the templates. You can make changes to the templates from here. You can change the names of the templates. So this is your list of current templates that are out there. So another section that typically gets overlooked when you're looking at the Firewall Manager, so this is CFM and SFM, is going to be maintenance, the backup and restore tab here. This is critical if you guys are using this. Devices do not automatically get put in here. As you bring a device in, you onboard a brand new device, this should be part of your processes. You should be taking more than just our backups in here. I recommend you have an email backup on the device itself. Or you set up, have it drop to a local share for that customer. And then I also recommend that you come in here, you select those devices that you want to pull a backup from, apply this, select your time that you want to go ahead and get those from, and make sure you apply all those settings. Again, every time you add a brand new firewall, you do need to come in here and add this. There's no way to add device groups on here, unfortunately. This will get easier when we get into CM. You'll simply select it during the onboarding phase, which again, you'll see here in a moment. And go we've carried 5 backups at any one given time. So again, very important component here to take a look at. The firmware option here, so I will review this real quick. This tends to be a little buggy for some folks at some times. So there is no way here to really go in and schedule a firmware. I can't see all the firmware different versions. I have to do a check. It'll go out and ping all the firewalls that are on there, see which one's on which version and which one has the availability to go up to the latest version. So if you're sitting on XG 17.5.1, MR3 is now available. However, MR3 is still in soft release early access. It's GA, but we essentially put everything in a soft release. It's out for our group 0. We'll phase in group 1, group 2 as we go through. So your firewall may not be hit yet for getting the MR3. You can always go in through my Sophos and get that manually if you have a need for that. This will only go through and find the firewall versions that are available for that specific firewall, the ones that it has access to currently. So you can't come in here, upload MR3 and say, all right, push this out to all of my firewalls. So it is a bit of a weird component inside of here currently. It does work, but again, occasionally does fail on there as it's trying to communicate back and forth with the firewall. So just keep tabs on this. I typically recommend going in and taking action on those firewalls individually. You can then go in and force the update after hours, whatever the case may be. Make sure that it's back up and running and everything looks good on it. Again, this won't report back that hey, everything's in a good state. So the other option that is worth noting here is going to be alerts. So again, this is a section that's not going to be set up by default, so I recommend you go in and set up. This one can be assigned by group. So once you set this up once, you're all set. We can see I have my default alert profile here. I am sending my alerts for these firewalls out to my personal address here on my test lab. And then what I'm doing is all my MSP firewalls. Remember those groups we set up? We're doing it by country. So in this case, I only deal with firewalls that are inside the United States. That's going to include all my firewalls. And I'm going to go through and select all the criteria for those alerts. If I want to know when my subscriptions are expiring, again, for those termed only, if my CPU is exceeding, memory is exceeding, whatever the case may be on here, you'll have all those options on here. If you have endpoints that are in a red state, probably, again, another good point to get alerted on. Maybe the endpoint team is getting alerted on endpoints in a red state, but we also want the network team to get alerted on that as well. Changes in device gateway status, the internet's going up and down. If we start seeing a lot of, up and down for those firewalls, all right, we need to go in and take a look at what's going on with this ISP, or is there something wrong with, maybe the hardware on there, or, somebody in there flipping a switch and they're not even realizing that the firewall is going offline. Your HA status, your VPN status on here, and again, your red tunnel as well. So again, you set these up once and you are all set. It's going to go to that group of firewalls. If you did need to set up alerts for a customer, they don't necessarily need access to the firewall. You can set up a different profile on here. You can select just their group or their device group on there and send it to their email address as well. So it makes it really easy. Last tab in here is going to be the event viewer. This will pull down the events from the actual XG firewalls that are on here. Mine don't have any events on here, so we're not actually going to see anything inside of the system. But this is going to be the device events, the device logs. The other component that's going to be on here is the management events on here as well. So what are we doing? What's happening on the XG firewall from SFM or CFM to the XG firewall? We'll go back to this once we actually push a template out to an XG firewall, so you can see what's going on inside of there, and it's going to show in progress, and then we'll wait until we get an actual success before that goes out to the device itself. All right, guys, let's take a look now at device configuration. So this is where we're actually going to get into the actual XG firewall itself. So the device configuration allows us to see an offline copy. This is not a connected copy, an offline synchronized copy of that XG firewall itself. If we come into here, we can see that we have at the very top, it says select devices. So there's a couple different ways in which you can do this. You can also see all the way over to the right-hand side, we have select devices here as well. And we also have a search up here at the top. If you know what you're looking for or know what it starts with, you can go ahead and type that in. So if this is a customer identifying name on here, you can see that. And we can go ahead and click into the firewall here. So we can select this webinar 2. It's going to, again, drop this and change this into my managed devices. We can also select here or select on the select devices here, and you'll see the options. So here's all the groups that I created. So if we click on my webinar firewalls, this will show just my webinar firewalls. The all firewalls in here by United States, so we'll show the different countries on there if you are dealing in multiple regions, and show the firewall. So we want to, again, select that and then log into that particular device. This will give you the dashboard. The dashboard is going to look different than the actual XG firewall page. It's going to have a lot more broken down detail on here. I personally like this kind of a detail page on here. You can see that memory that we're up to 85% with my red mark in here is quick and easy to find out. And then that one thing I wanted to point out, the device status on here with an interface down. That interface down is going to be this one right here, port C. And as you can see, the status on that is disabled. So that is my status, or my device that's down, that is causing that weird little bug inside of there. This is going to give you some other stats on here, antivirus versions. You have the packet capture diagnostic tools inside of here, your CPU and memory options here. As well as who's responsible for the device, the versions it happens to be sitting on, the time zone. You can see what mode it is currently in, so push mode versus the fetch. The difference on those being that the push mode is going to go out as soon as you make a change on here. It's going to reach out to that firewall, log into the device, and push the changes immediately to it. Fetch is going to basically say the changes are out here. The next time the XG firewall checks in, it's going to grab those changes and bring them down itself. So it is two different modes on there. Fetch is typically useful for when a firewall is behind another router. So in the case of mine, where it's a lab, if this was going up to CFM and it's behind another firewall inside of my lab nested, at that point I'd have to put it on fetch. There's no way for CFM to reach in directly behind all those different firewall layers to get to these devices. I'll let the firewall go out, grab the configuration components that it needs, templates, changes, whatever the case may be, and bring those back in. Now, from here, we can go in. You can see on the left-hand side, you're going to have all the options you would normally have on a firewall. The reporting is not going to be in here, so you will notice that that component is missing on here. You will have some diagnostic options, current activities, but under your protect, your firewall rules, your web filtering rules, applications. If we click on any one of these, you can see in here, here's my firewall rule. There's nothing much inside of this actual firewall at the moment. If we come into this actual webinar firewall, you can see here's the exact same rule that's applied. You can create rules right from here. So if we went in here and created just a very basic test rule on here, made sure we selected our criteria. We're going to put this one from the DMZ, because we're going to be doing LAN here in a minute, out to the WAN. And we're not going to select a whole lot of options, and hit save. Basically what this is doing is it's queuing this to be automatically pushed to that firewall. It will take a moment or two, but it will go ahead and push that out to the XG firewall. If we come on the firewall itself now, here's my test rule that just got added. Just that quick, it's on there. The screen here, we will need to refresh if we want to see that inside of here, and we have our test on here as well. So from the device configuration, again, this is a visual representation of what's on the XG firewall. We're not actually logged into the firewall. If we made a change on here, it's going to queue that activity up, and it's going to reach out to that firewall to make the change on that device itself. Same thing if we were to go through and clone this, delete this, whatever the case may be. all actions you take right here get queued, and you can then go into that firewall and see exactly what's happened on that device. And as you can see on here with push, those do happen rather quickly. So it is near real time for that device. So what I want to do is I want to get into some templates now. Let's talk about actually creating a template, and then let's provision a template out to these two firewalls here so you guys can see exactly what's going on. So we're going to click on my templates page here. Again, you're going to have a couple different options. So you're going to come in and click on the template page, and you're going to see the different templates we have available. So I have 3 different templates. We're going to be using my Corp Web and App template inside of here. Once you pull up, this is going to give you the summary. The summary page is actually where we are going to provision the template from, down at the bottom. We're going to review this one first, and then we can go in and show you all the different changes. But this provision option is only available on the actual summary page. This will show you the different firewall rules. You can see this includes one firewall rule. This has one IPS policy included in it. It has some denial of service settings inside of here, along with my web policies and some exemptions that are going to get pushed out here as well. So it gives you a rough idea of what's going to be pushed out. You can also see the recent activities from this as well. So you can see whether or not traffic shaping policy has been deleted from the web file, the template here. You can see I went and cleaned up my template. So by default, when we create a brand new template, and we're going to go ahead and do that, we're going to add a brand new template before we get into configuring this. We're going to call this one test. Couple of options on here. So you have the option to create a brand new from scratch, just like as if you're configuring a brand new XG firewall. That's gonna be your first option. You have the option of importing configuration from a current device. So if this firewall had the configuration that I wanted to start with and get a good base on there, I can go ahead and select that one. If I had a template, maybe my Corp Web and App template is a good base for where I want to start, but I need to make some changes for another company. Again, you can select that and go through here. We're going to select a brand new template, let that process for a second. And what that's going to do is it's going to bring up a page looking like my XG firewall. This is going to have all the default settings that you would normally see on the XG firewall. So one of the things that I do, and one of the things I'd recommend you guys do when you're starting templates, is clean up the template first. So don't go and start adding a bunch of stuff in there. What you'll notice if we come into the IPS policies, besides the ones that are static and you cannot remove, you'll have these additional ones in there, these temp policies that we put in just to kind of give you some guidance. I start out by removing these policies out of there. You can do these one-on-one, or you can do them in mass here, but I want to get those out. Those are just default template policies. If you want to edit one, great, start from there, and then I go ahead and add a brand new IPS policy in here. I'll do the same thing for the web policies in here as well. So you can see you've got all your default policies, all the default options that come in here. We don't want to push these out to every single firewall. They're the default, they're already in there. So typically what I'll do, and again, this does take some time, so you may want to create a template on there that just says clean and leave that as your one that you can clone as a nice, good, clean template. So we can come through and delete these and delete all the different policy holders out of there. Same thing with the exemptions. With the exemptions though, leave the ones that you obviously want active. If I'm not worried about Microsoft Windows Update or these legacies, I can go ahead and delete those out of there. I obviously want to keep the Sophos Live Connect and the Sophos services in here. I want to make sure those are active and that they are allowed inside of the system. So it's just a good way to go through and actually prep and clean the template before you actually dive into it and start building out any firewall rules for that template. Now coming and taking a look at my XG template here, we can come into my firewall rule. For this one, I've got my LAN to WAN access on here. You can see on the firewall rule, I went ahead and deleted that default SMTP rule out of there. I don't want to push that out to my firewalls. It already exists by default. But what doesn't exist by default, unless you go through the full setup wizard, is a standard LAN to WAN setting on here. So I've got this LAN to WAN setting on here. I'm not picking any specific networks on here. We're not going to know that at the time. This is going to be pretty generic. If there's any time of day, so if you have guest networks for wireless or you have DMZ networks that you set up on these, you can set all these up. You can set your time schedules. You can, identity you'll want to set up after the fact. Make sure you have your AD in there. But this is going to be your base policy that's going to be pushed out to these devices. Are we going to turn on the web filtering and the scanning? What policies are going to attach? So you can see I've got my Corp policy. Now I do recommend naming these. So naming them something unique that actually matches the template name. So you can see here my template name is Corp Web and App Template. This is primarily because this is where I get all my default web and app templates for the base inside of my environment. If I need to make a change to the web, I can go and just push those web policy changes to all of the firewalls. And again, I'll show you how that works here in a minute. But each one of those rules starts with Corp. That way, under my traffic shaping, IPS, web, and app, I know that this policy belongs to this template. And if you're actually looking at that firewall, we go into the firewall, once this gets pushed, you'll see that Corp name in front of it, and it should ring that bell on there if, yes, this was pushed out by my template. I know exactly what that was. Again, configure all your different policies in here, load balancing, all your options. Web filtering, you'll notice I have just my one web policy inside of here as well, my Corp policy. I'm adding in an exemption. So this is something you're going to see. We're adding an exemption in for, in this case, Dropbox, to make sure we're not doing any HTTPS inspection. Dropbox is really funny about that, doesn't like the man in the middle approach. Same with your application filters. If you want to set up any traffic shaping defaults, you want to add anything to the application list or modify it, you can do that there. Set up your application filters. Again, your deny all and allow all are default. Can't get rid of those, but you can set your Corp policy inside of here. The other thing that I typically do is I go ahead and set up some traffic shaping rules. So you can see that default traffic shaping policy on here. I'm not going to get into the details of how traffic shaping works. If you guys have questions, we can definitely review that. One thing I will say is keep in mind that this does say capital KB PPS. So you'll see that I have 125 in here. Use Google, do megabits per second to kbps, and you'll see what the translation is. So this 125 is actually 1 megabit per second that I'm limiting. And this is individual, so you can do that shared or individual on the policies. So essentially when I'm applying this, if I've got a gigabit connection, 100 megabit connection, I'm only allowing each one of those users to use upwards of 1 meg. So for me, that's just limiting. I don't need, normal users hogging up all the bandwidth. Will limit what they can do and what they can stream off of there. So let's get into deploying now. Let's take a look at this. So we're going to get into the summary here, and we're going to go and provision this template. So we've got all of our policies set up in here. We've got our firewall rules. And again, we can come in, we can verify on here on my web that there is no Corp template on here. There's no exemptions on here for Dropbox. So we are going to push all these right now. So we come in, we provision that template. You'll get an option. So we can either select all, take everything that's inside of this template, and push it as is, or we can go through and be selective. So where selective comes in handy at is if you are going through, and let's say we're doing this as just my web and app template, and I don't want to mess with any firewall rules, but I changed my Corp web policy. And I made a change to my Corp web policy, and I want to push that change to all firewalls across the board. I don't want to mess with the firewall rules that we did initially. Those have probably changed. We've probably gone into security. We've probably made some other components on there. I want to just push the web policies on here. Now, you can't get specific and say which web policy inside here. So again, that's why we clean that up inside of there. If we made any changes or anything happened to the default, we're not going to push those out there. So I have just that one policy that's going to be pushed. For this one, we're going to go ahead and select all of those. I actually have components under firewall, intrusion prevention, application. I've also got components under my system services for the traffic shaping. You can see that one option on here. And we're going to go ahead and confirm this. Now, the very next thing that's going to happen when you confirm this is you're going to be asked to schedule this. You can either set that to immediately, which is what we're going to do, or if we're doing a web and app policy and we need to set those, and maybe these changes are going to go in effect tonight. We can select just those Corp web app policy templates we're going to make changes to and schedule that for a certain point in time during the day. We can also schedule that according to the device's time zone as well. So we want to make sure that happens at midnight on all devices across the board. We can push that out, and it's going to happen at midnight for those particular devices. The other option on here, which is going to be by default, yes, because you are going to want to override that current configuration that is on there, is this override. If you select no on here, you're essentially going to get a Corp policy 2 or Corp policy underscore copy. So we want to override that current policy that is on there. The next portion of this is which devices are we going to send this out to? We're going to send this out to just our webinar firewalls on here. We can come in and select those individually, or are we going to go ahead and select a device group? So this is, again, where device groups comes in very handy. We can select a device group on here. We can find, in this case, my webinar firewalls, which is just going to apply to these. So this is also great for a customer that may have multiple sites, and you have a web policy that you want to push out and make sure it's the same across all of the sites. You can select a dynamic group for that customer with their name in there, just as I've done with my webinars, and push that out to those customers. Make those changes just to those customer firewalls without going through and picking those devices individually. And because it is a dynamic group and it's based on the name, as long as the firewall gets onboarded into here correctly, the name gets added and appended to the front of it, it'll be part of this group automatically. So we're going to go ahead and save this, let that push out. You can see at the top here, the template has been pushed to the selected devices, and we can now go into the event details. So on the event details, and this will take a few moments, it is actually reaching out to those firewalls, it's logging onto the firewall, it's running through the entire template for the firewall. So this will take about, it says 2 to 3 minutes on here. So let's take a look at CM. We're going to go into CM real quick, and then we can answer all the other questions. So taking a look at the CM management on here. If we come into the XG Firewall itself, we can go in under the synchronized central synchronization here. This is where you set up your synchronized security. This firewall has already been set up for synchronized security. It's bound to my Steve Weber at my test lab account here, and you can see that the synchronized security and the app control, which is what you would normally see, is set up. You now have the option inside of here to set up the manage from Sophos Central. So all you have to do for this to manage from here is actually turn this on. This will prompt you at this point in time that you are going to be applying this. You can only have one management, so you cannot have it managed from SFM, CFM, and CM. So you can only pick one option. And inside of here, so remember I was telling you there's only one spot you have to go in to send your backup configuration. So this is early, it's in here. You're not going to see your backups just yet. That will be 1.1, but you have that option. It's already going to be checked inside here to send those backups up to the Firewall Manager. If we do the same thing on our other firewall, just to take this from the other level where it's not even attached to synchronized security at this point, if we were to come into my central synchronization on this firewall, you're going to see at this point you now have to register. This does require that you have an admin account with Sophos Central Admin for that customer. So this is important. You have to have an admin or a super admin account with that customer's central admin. Your Sophos Central partner login will not work to set up the synchronized security. We've got tons on the Sophos Hub on how to get this set up, so I'm not going to walk through that in great detail. But you need to have a unique email address set up for that central admin for those firewalls to connect into. So this account here is set up against my personal account. So it's just going to be, again, my Steve Weber at my test lab. And we'll go ahead and populate my password, and we'll register that device. Now what that's doing is it's actually logging into my Sophos Central account. It's registering the firewall with that. And at this point, it'll set up my synchronized security heartbeat and my application control by default. You'll notice that it does not turn on the central management. That is a piece that you have to do yourself. You will have to come in and click on this, select OK here, and then accept that, yes, you want to have those backups sent up to Sophos Central, and we are going to manage this firewall in our Sophos Central admin console. So normally, you as a partner, you'd be going through your central partner dashboard. Because this is my personal account here, I'm logging directly onto a Sophos Central admin account, again, designated at the top here by the Sophos Central admin. Once we log onto this, you're going to see the exact representation of what you would see under a normal Sophos Central admin account. You're going to have the options in here for the dashboard, the alerts, all the different products in here. And if you were to scroll down here, you can see the firewall management. This is going to be the new CM. So there are a couple places, and I'm going to point this out here in a second as well. When we come into CM, you're going to get the dashboard. Now, this will grow over time, so the dashboard is very basic and very simplistic at this point. Again, it is version 1. We want to get something out there and into your hands. You can see the alerts that are coming through here. you can see that I have all my firewalls connected. So there's 6 of them currently in here, and I have 2 that are not managed. I have no firewalls with any health issues at this moment, and none that are currently expiring. If we come into our firewall, so we already set it up, we sent it over to CM. The next step that we have to do is actually accept it. So simply sending it up and having it register inside of there does not automatically make it so that it's available. You have to come log in here, and you'll have to hit on the accept management for this device. It's as simple as that. So if you remember the CFM process, you have to go through quite a few different steps. You have to log into my Sophos. We have to accept the product in there. This simplifies that process greatly. Now on here, because I have this firewall and I know which one this is, if I wanted to, I can come through and actually name this, because I'm not expecting you guys to remember what all these serial numbers actually mean. So we can come in here, we can name this one my webinar XG1 and rename that. That way it's quick and easy to find on the dashboard here. Again, this is version 1. We're not planning on a ton of firewalls per customer at this point, so notice there is no search available yet. Searches and all those features will be coming later on as it starts to be adopted more and more. This does give you the serial number on there. It's going to, again, bring in the information. You can see that this has the model number, the serial number of that device. It will eventually also show you the some other information pertaining other than, you can see here my different versions. This one's running 17.1 on the firewall. This one's running 17.5.3 on the firewall. Again, we can accept the management inside of here. Now, the difference on this is going to be when we actually click on one of these particular firewalls, it's going to actually launch us into that XG firewall. So if we wanted to take a look at this XG webinar firewall here, we're going to go ahead and it's going to tell us to wait a few seconds. What it's doing is it's basically putting a token out there for the XG firewall to grab. That's going to grab that and then bring us into the XG firewall itself. No WAN access is needed on that firewall. This will be a full onboard access to the XG firewall. You see all your options inside of here. You can see the synchronizations. You can change your network settings. This is just like as if you are sitting on the XG firewall itself. Add your firewall rules in, add your web filtering rules in. All those components are live as soon as you add them. Move your rules up and down, whatever the case may be. Just remember, this is not a template. This is not SFM where it's a synchronized copy. This is the live firewall as it stands right now. To get back, you're going to see this back to firewall management at the top here. Simply click on that. It'll exit out of that and then bring you back into your Sophos Central admin. That way you can go in and connect it to the next firewall on there as well. You will see that there are going to be some alerts. This one's been successfully registered. It's been enabled for firewall management. So those are my 2 alerts on here. You can click on this. It will bring you into the alerting section, and you can see all the alerts coming in for your firewall, whether there's IPsec tunnels that are being connected or disconnected, whether you have an interface that's going to be up or down. And because this is in Central, if you are sending these alerts off to your RMM, to your ticketing system, these alerts are going to be available for you as well. Now, we do have some alerting options that'll be coming up here shortly, basically some additional components where you can select which alerts you want to send. Right now, I know it is a fire hose. You basically select turn it on and give me everything, or just give me the daily. By the end of this quarter, so by the end of March, we'll have the granularity control in there. You'll be able to go in and configure the options that you want to configure, which options you want to see, how often do you want to see those, do you need them immediately, or just give me the daily roundup for those. So that granular configuration is coming for the alerting as well. So with that, one other section on here. So one thing I did want to mention, so you notice we have 6 firewalls in here. There is another component where you can see these firewalls registered as well. If we go under global settings, if you have a legacy firewall that's on here, it's in there with synchronized security. It says that you have maybe 7 firewalls in there, but a couple aren't managed. Those will be registered. So those ones that are actually registered inside of here, for right now until we get to 1.1, there is a little hiccup on how it's reporting those. But this is the exact list of all the registered firewalls that are reporting in to your Sophos Central admin. So if you're wanting to see kind of the behind the scenes, this has been here for quite a while, the IP address that it's coming from, and if those are active. You can delete those out of here, which will kill that synchronized security connection and kill the connection to CM1 as well. So with that, hopefully that's a pretty good overview for you guys. This is a great tool if you guys want to get started on here. Again, I do want to point out there are no backup options on here currently. There are no firmware updates on here currently. Those are coming in CM1.1, hopefully by either the end of this quarter or the beginning of next quarter. So they are right around the corner. Those I think will be the turning point where we can start moving a lot more MSPs in here that don't need the template option available to them. They just need a way to get in and manage those firewalls. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for joining us on this call. I hope you guys learned some stuff about CFM and SFM, and then learned a little bit about the central management that's coming and the new features we have coming. You guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you in the next webinar.